My name is Charlie, and on this channel I make videos about building wealth and achieving financial freedom so that you can free up your time to focus on the things that you truly care about. So this is the 6th episode of my Road to Financial Freedom series, and this is where I document the growth of a small portfolio that I started about 5 months ago, which I'm trying to grow as quickly as possible using the strategies that I talk about on this channel, like covered call writing and LEAPS option buying. So I started the account with a $5,000 deposit, and in addition to that, I'm also depositing $200 every single week. So the goal is to simulate the portfolio of someone working to achieve financial freedom starting from scratch, and to see how quickly it can actually be done. Now with that said, let's see how the portfolio is doing so far. So for those of you that have seen my past few videos, you know that I've moved my portfolio spreadsheet over to Google Sheets. And if you want to get access to the template along with my actual portfolios, you can check out my Patreon, which will be linked in the description below. So as of the end of the day on April 30th, 2021, my portfolio is sitting at about $9,170, which is a total money weighted return of about 2.55%, and that represents about a 0.5% return per month. So we are finally back in the green after that pullback from February and March, but I do still expect the portfolio to continue recovering strongly over the next few months. So we'll start off as we always do by taking a look at the premiums I brought in last month. And it was another slightly slower month for premiums, so I brought in $165, which represents about a 2% return as a percentage of my portfolio, which is pretty much the minimum that I aim to achieve on a monthly basis. And again, this is really just because I'm still waiting for several of my stocks to recover, so I'm not able to bring in extremely high premiums right now. But in terms of the stocks that I'm selling covered calls on, I haven't changed anything up since last month, so I'm still selling covered calls on ChargePoint and Zynga, and then I'm selling poor man's covered calls on Apple. I did buy another 15 shares of ChargePoint on the side since the last episode, and I bought those at an average price of about $20.05. So I had an April 30th $25 strike call sold against one set of my ChargePoint shares, and that trade did end up expiring in the money, so I got 100 of my ChargePoint shares called away from me. And now my plan is to, at the beginning of next week, buy back into another 100 shares of ChargePoint, because it is still hovering around the same $25 price. And then I plan to sell a $26.50 strike expiring on May 14th. And I should bring in a premium of about $100 for that trade. So even though I haven't actually made that trade yet, I did already input it into my spreadsheet, as you can see here, just so that I remember what it is that I want to do. I did look for some new stocks to start selling covered calls on, but I couldn't really find any that I was comfortable with that had decent premiums like ChargePoint does. So I decided to just stick with ChargePoint because again, it is a company that I really like. Then as far as my poor man's covered call on Apple, I'm still pretty happy with how that trade is playing out because Apple announced a really positive earnings report last week, so I definitely expect it to do well over the next month or two. So right now I have a 140 strike call sold against that LEAPS option, and I plan to just continue selling calls around that strike price until Apple eventually exceeds $140 per share. Now looking at my LEAPS options, I still have my 2 AMD LEAPS, and AMD is another company that released a very positive earnings report last week, so I'm not really sure why it hasn't risen over the past few months, but I still think it's only a matter of time before it shoots up. But towards the end of this video, I will go into a little bit more detail on what I plan to do if the stock doesn't end up rising, and talk in general about what I do when a LEAPS option trade doesn't go my way. But before we get into that, I also want to talk about my long-term holds. So since the last episode, I bought back into Apple, so I have 1 share now. And I bought that at a price of about $134.68. And my overall gain on my long-term holds right now is about $123. So with all of that said, let's go back to my AMD LEAPS here. And we can see that I have one that expires in June 2022 and one that expires in January 2023. So as we know, if an option gets within 1 year of expiration, then it's technically no longer a LEAPS option. So if June comes around and that first AMD LEAPS still isn't profitable, I may consider at some point rolling it out further in time to give myself more time for AMD to recover. Most likely though, I'd wait till it's about 6 to 9 months from expiration because that's really when the most time decay is going to start taking effect. But another option you have if a LEAPS trade isn't going your way is to use that LEAPS as collateral to sell a call. So for example with AMD, since it's trading around $80 per share right now, I would probably sell a 90 strike call about 2 to 4 weeks out, kind of in the same way that I would if I were setting up a bear call spread or selling a naked call on AMD. And then in the same way that I do when I sell a naked call, if AMD does end up rising, I'll actually just go ahead and buy 100 shares of the stock so that I can deliver them at my $90 strike price. That way I don't have to worry about buying that short call back at a loss when the stock rises. So in that way, it's a pretty low risk trade, especially if you see the stock remaining neutral for a while, because if the stock doesn't rise to above the strike price of the call you sell, then you can just keep collecting premium without ever having to buy any additional shares. So in this portfolio, I can't really do that right now because I don't have enough free cash to buy 100 shares of AMD if the stock does end up rising. But I do it in my main portfolio sometimes, so I just wanted to throw it out there as an example for anyone who might want to give it a try. So if you haven't seen the video where I discuss my naked call and bear call spread strategy, what I just said may not make a lot of sense, so I'd recommend that you check that video out in the bottom right corner of the screen. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.